The story you are about to hear explores themes of institutional influence, psychological manipulation, and the complex nature of human connection. While inspired by real accounts of cult psychology and the experience of those who have left such environments, this narrative is a work of creative fiction, not a documentation of any specific group or individual. This is a work of fiction. All characters, names, places, and events depicted in this story are products of imagination and are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, actual organizations, or actual events is entirely coincidental and unintentional. We tell ourselves that we will always know when we're being led astray. We believe we are too intelligent, too careful, too aware of our own minds to be captured by ideology, by belonging, by the seductive promise of a life that asks nothing but your presence. But what if the capture is gentle? What if it arrives not as a cage, but as an open door? What if the person leading you speaks in a voice so warm, so fully attentive, that you begin to believe you have finally been seen, truly seen, for the first time in your life? The Leaving is a story told backward, beginning with the end and moving toward the beginning. It is the account of a woman named Mara, who walks away from a compound she loved more than she loved herself, and must now retrace her steps through memory to understand how she stayed so long, and why the staying felt, for years, like freedom. This is a story about the architecture of belief, about how we construct the cages we live in, about the moment you almost see the truth and choose instead to turn away. It is a slow burn, a dream, a mirror held up to the parts of ourselves that hunger for certainty, for meaning, for someone else to tell us who we are. Listen carefully. You may recognize something of yourself in these pages.
The Leaving. Part 1. There is a particular quality of light on the day you leave a place you have loved too much. I don't mean golden. I don't mean beautiful. I mean the light has a thinness to it, like a fabric worn through from the inside, and everything it touches looks both real and slightly past, as though the world has already begun the work of becoming memory while you're still standing in it. Tuesday. October again, the same month I arrived, though I did not plan that symmetry and do not want it. The gate was open. It was always open. I want you to sit with that. Not locked. Not guarded. Not even heavy. A wooden gate with a latch that a child could lift, and beyond it a gravel road dissolving into pines, and beyond the pines the sound of the highway, faint as a river heard from a distant room. I walked through it carrying a canvas bag with almost nothing inside. A change of clothes. A book I would never finish. A small ceramic bowl I had taken from the kitchen, stolen, I suppose, though theft felt like a concept from another grammar, one I had not spoken in years. The air smelled like wood smoke and cold soil. Behind me, the compound sat in its clearing the way it always sat, white and low and quiet, like something that had grown there rather than been built. I did not look back. I am telling you this and I want it to sound like strength, but it was not strength. It was the knowledge that if I turned around I would see the garden, and the garden would be enough. The light on the garden would be enough. And I would walk back through the open gate and sit down among the raised beds and press my hands into the dirt and stay for another 4 years, another 10, until I was so woven into the place that leaving would require a kind of surgery I could not survive. So I did not look back. I walked. The bus station was a small, ordinary building in a small, ordinary town. Fluorescent light. A vending machine humming in the corner. A woman behind the counter who looked at me without curiosity, who handed me my ticket and said, "Platform 2, as though I were anyone, as though this were any day, and I wanted to grab her wrist and say, I am leaving. I am leaving a place I cannot explain to you. I am leaving, and I don't know if I'm saving myself or killing something that was more alive than anything I will ever find again. I sat in a plastic chair. I texted Lena. Just, I'm going. The 3 dots appeared. Disappeared. Appeared again. Then, okay. I love you. Come back when you're ready. I read it twice. I put the phone away. Through the window, the light was doing that thing again, thin, transparent, the whole world looking like a photograph of itself. That was 3 years ago. I live in the city now. I have an apartment with a kitchen window that faces a brick wall, and a job that requires nothing of my interior life, and a therapist named Claire who sits across from me every Thursday and waits with extraordinary patience while I circle the thing I cannot say. She has a plant on her windowsill, a fern, leggy and pale, and sometimes during our silences I watch it move in the draft from the heating vent and think about how things grow toward whatever light is available, even if the light is artificial, even if it comes from the wrong direction. Lena texts me sometimes. Her messages arrive like weather from a country I once lived in, warm, carrying a particular scent, full of words that sound ordinary but open like doors into rooms I thought I'd left. Clarity. Presence. Work. Our words. The language of that place, which was not a language anyone else would recognize as foreign but which I still dream in, sometimes, and wake disoriented, reaching for a wall that isn't there. I am going to tell this story backward. I need you to understand why. It is not an aesthetic choice. It is the only way I can walk toward the beginning without turning around, by starting from the end and letting the momentum carry me, the way you might walk backward into cold water, not because you're afraid of the water but because you need to keep your eyes on the shore for as long as possible, to remind yourself that solid ground exists. Part 2. 2 weeks before I left, there was an evening. The light came in low and amber through the windows of the main hall, drawing long rectangles across the floor, across the rows of seated bodies, across the wide ceramic bowls that held the remains of our meal. Grain and roasted vegetables. The smell of rosemary from the garden. Everything suffused with that particular end-of-day stillness that the compound wore like a garment, not silence exactly, but a hush, a held note, the feeling of a room full of people who have agreed, without speaking, to breathe at the same pace. He stood at the front. No podium. No stage. Just a man in a plain shirt, his hands loose at his sides, his voice doing the thing his voice always did, filling the room not with volume but with presence, the way a single sustained note from a cello can fill a cathedral. He spoke about noise. About how the outside world was an engine designed to produce it, endless, recursive, self-generating noise, so that people would never have to encounter the frequency of their own being. He said we were tuning forks. He said the compound was a place where the interference had been stripped away, and what remained was signal, pure signal, and our work was to learn to vibrate at its pitch. Lena was beside me. Her eyes were closed. She always closed her eyes when he spoke, not in submission, not in worship, but the way you close your eyes at a concert when the music finds the exact center of you and you need to remove the distraction of sight to feel it fully. Her hand was resting on her knee, palm open, fingers slightly curled, like a flower that had bloomed and was now simply being, and I remember looking at that hand and feeling something crack open in my chest, love, or something adjacent to love, or something that used the architecture of love to house itself. I loved Lena. Let me say it simply because nothing else I say about that place will be simple. She was the first person who spoke to me there as though I already belonged. She showed me where things were kept, towels, soap, the good tea hidden behind the chamomile. She walked with me in the mornings before anyone else was up, along the tree line where the mist gathered in low drifts and the light came through the branches in shafts that looked, I swear to you, like something from a painting. She told me about her life before, a sister in Denver, a degree she'd abandoned, a year in Portugal she described as the last time she'd felt awake. Until here, she said. Until here. We never talked about him directly. We talked around him the way you talk around a mountain, not because you're avoiding it but because it's everywhere. It's the thing that shapes the horizon, and pointing at it would be like pointing at the sky. After the meeting I went to my room. A small white room. A mattress on a low frame. A window that faced the garden, where the last of the light was pooling in the beds like something poured. A shelf with 3 books I'd been given when I arrived, their spines soft, their pages annotated in pencils by hands I didn't know. I sat on the bed. I thought, I am happy here. And I was. I need you to believe that. Not as delusion, not as symptom. As fact. I was happy there the way a plant is happy in a greenhouse, completely, genuinely, in an environment that was controlled and enclosed and would, eventually, prove to be too small. But the happiness was real. It is still real, in my memory, and I will not apologize for it, because it is the only honest thing I have. Part 3. A month before that evening, there was David. David had been at the compound longer than almost anyone, 6 years, since nearly the beginning. He was a quiet man with careful hands and a small notebook he kept in his shirt pocket where he recorded rainfall and temperature, barometric pressure, the dates when certain birds returned in spring. Nobody had asked him to do this. He did it because he believed the land deserved a witness, and he had appointed himself, and there was something in that private devotion that I found unbearably tender. He maintained the solar panels. He maintained the water filtration. He built a cold frame for the garden that extended the growing season by 6 weeks. He was the kind of person a community cannot function without and rarely thanks. One evening, during a meeting, David asked a question. Something about money, where the donations went, how spending decisions were made. His voice was calm. It was the voice of a man who trusted the answer would be reasonable, who was asking not out of suspicion but out of the same meticulous care he brought to everything. He wanted to understand. That was all. The room changed. Not visibly, no one moved, no one spoke. But the air shifted, the way air shifts before a storm, a drop in pressure you feel in your teeth. He looked at David. He looked at him for a long time. The silence accumulated like snow, soft, heavy, covering everything. Then he said, "David, would you like to spend some time in reflection?" David said yes. There was nothing else to say. Every eye in the room was on him, and the weight of that collective gaze was a gravity you could not resist without becoming, in that moment, something other than one of us. Reflection was the small building at the eastern edge of the compound. A single room. No windows. A mattress on the floor. Water and meals brought twice a day. You went there to sit with whatever doubt had surfaced in you, to trace it to its root, to find the part of yourself that had generated it and offer that part up for correction. You came back when you could say, clearly and calmly, what you had found. I brought David his meal once. My turn on the rotation. I carried the tray across the compound in the blue half-light before dawn, the grass wet under my shoes, the stars still showing faintly overhead. I unlocked the door. Set the tray inside. He was sitting against the wall, knees drawn up, a notebook open on the floor beside him. Not his rainfall notebook, a different one, provided for reflection, its pages dense with small, tight handwriting. He looked at me. I looked at him. The room smelled like stillness and unwashed skin and something else, something I did not have a name for then and now recognize as the smell of a person metabolizing fear. I locked the door behind me. I walked back. The sky was lightening at the edges, pink and pale gold, and I stopped and looked up and told myself that what was happening to David was care. Difficult care. The kind the world outside was too comfortable to provide. David came back after 9 days. He was the same. Almost the same. He still kept his notebook. He still recorded the rainfall. But there was something behind his eyes that had gone quiet in a way that was different from his usual quiet, a stillness that was not peace but its opposite, the stillness of something that has learned not to move. Lena said, he needed it. Sometimes we all need it. I said, yes. What I thought was a door I closed softly and have not opened since. Until now. Until this sentence. Part 4. 3 months before David's question, I was given a task. There was a couple, Brian and Sarah, who had been writing to us. To him. They were searching, the way people on the outside search, restlessly, with the kind of hunger that mistakes every new thing for the thing it actually needs. He asked me to write to them. Share my experience. My testimony, he called it, and the word felt clean in his mouth, scrubbed of religion, meaning only, tell them what is true. So I wrote. I told them about the mornings, the mist, the quiet, the feeling of waking into a day that had already been shaped for you, that asked only your presence. I told them about the garden, the meals, the slow dissolution of the performing self that happened when you stopped living for an audience. I wrote carefully. I wrote with the particular kind of honesty that is more dangerous than any lie, because it is true, and because the person telling it doesn't know what it's in service of. They came for a weekend. Then a week. Then they stayed. I showed Sarah where the towels were kept. I walked with her in the mornings. I heard my voice saying things Lena had said to me, the same phrases, the same cadences, as though the place had a script and I had learned my lines without knowing I was learning them. I felt warmth in that. Continuity. The sense of being a link in a chain that stretched back and forward, a lit candle passing its flame. What I did not feel, what I taught myself not to feel, was the mechanism. The precision of it. The way my sincerity was the most effective instrument of recruitment the compound possessed, precisely because it was not recruitment, precisely because I meant every word, precisely because nobody can sell a thing as convincingly as someone who doesn't know they're selling. Brian left after 2 months. Sarah stayed. They had arrived together and now Sarah sat alone at meals and did not mention his name and nobody encouraged her to, and I told myself this was liberation. That she had been freed from an attachment that was limiting her growth. I told myself that. The sentence sat in my mind like a stone in a shoe, and I walked on it, and after a while I stopped feeling it, which is not the same as it not being there. Part 5. 6 months before Sarah and Brian, there was the night Lena and I almost left. Summer. The air thick and slow and sweet with whatever was blooming along the tree line, honeysuckle, I think, or something like it, something that released its scent only at night, as though sweetness were a secret best kept from the day. We had been walking, one of our morning walks displaced into darkness because neither of us could sleep. Past the garden, past the workshop where the tools hung on their pegs in neat rows, past the chicken coop where something rustled and settled, out to where the gravel road began its slow curve toward the highway. We stood there. The road was pale in the moonlight, almost white, stretching ahead like a blank page. Somewhere far off, a truck shifted gears, the sound rising and falling, the Doppler curve of a life passing at speed. Lena said, "Do you ever think about just?" She didn't finish. The sentence hung in the air between us like smoke. I said, "Sometimes." We stood there for a long time. Behind us, the compound was dark except for his window, which was always lit, a warm yellow square in the darkness that we understood to mean vigilance, devotion, the sleepless labor of a man carrying awareness on behalf of those who could not yet carry it themselves. We understood that. We had been taught to understand it. The lit window was a symbol and we read it fluently, the way you read any language you've been immersed in long enough. Lena said, "I wouldn't know what to do out there." I said, "Me neither." We walked back. The honeysuckle was still blooming. The stars were still overhead. In the morning, everything was the same. We never spoke of it. But I think about that night with the quality of attention you give a dream that felt more real than waking, the two of us standing at the edge of the open road, the moonlight on the gravel, the whole world available and terrifying. Two people who could have walked into the dark and didn't. Not because the road was closed. Because the openness of it was the most frightening thing either of us had ever seen. I wonder what would have happened if I had taken one step. Just one. Whether Lena would have followed. Whether we would have walked together in the dark until we found the highway and stood there in the warm wind of passing trucks and eventually climbed into one and ridden it to some town we'd never heard of and sat in a diner booth and looked at each other across the Formica and laughed, or wept, or simply breathed in the strange, enormous, unstructured air of a life that belonged to no one but ourselves. I think she would have followed. I think she was waiting for me. I turned around. So she turned around. And she is still there. And the distance between us is not geography. It is the weight of a step I didn't take, a step she needed me to take, and I didn't, and she is still paying for that, and she doesn't know it, and I will carry that the way David carried his notebook, quietly, daily, recording what the world does whether or not anyone asks me to. Part 6. A year before the night walk, my mother called. She had been calling. Every few weeks, a voicemail that arrived like a letter from another century, her voice careful, Midwestern, precise in its restraint. She mentioned the weather. My brother's new job. The dog's hip surgery. She said she missed me. She said the door was always open. The door was always open. She said this every time, and every time the phrase landed on me like light through stained glass, colored, weighted, transforming the surface it touched. Because the gate here was also always open, and I had begun to understand that openness could be a kind of enclosure. The cage of your own choosing. The cage of knowing you can leave and don't, and what does that make you? And if you stay, isn't that proof that you belong here? And if you belong here, then why does your mother's voice make you sit on the edge of your bed with your hands pressed between your knees to keep them from shaking? I didn't call her back. He said, during a meeting, not directed at me, but I received it as though it had been aimed with the precision of a dart, that the ties of blood were the first illusion. That the family you were born into was the original cult, if you wanted to use that word. The first group that claimed you before you could consent. That wrote its mythology on your skin before you had language to refuse. He said what we were building here was the first family any of us had truly chosen. I nodded. I felt the nod in my whole body, the way you feel a bell after it's been struck, not the sound but the vibration, traveling through you, rearranging something at the cellular level. I think about my mother's hands. The way she folded laundry, precise, unhurried, devoted to the geometry of it, as though the act of folding a towel were a small prayer and the linen closet were a kind of altar. I think about what it cost her to leave those voicemails. To keep her voice steady. To say the door was always open, again and again, as though repetition could build a bridge across the silence I had placed between us. Last month I called her. Late, too late, really, but I dialed before the part of me that was still loyal to that place could stop my hands. She picked up on the second ring. No sleep in her voice. And I understood, from the speed of that answer, that she had been waiting by the phone for 4 years. Not literally. But in every way that a body can wait, that a heart can hold itself in readiness, she had been waiting. We talked about small things. The garden. My apartment. We were careful with each other, the way you handle a glass that has been cracked, still functional, still holding water, but you can see the fracture line, and you know where not to press. Before she hung up she said, "I'm glad you called." Not, "Where were you?" Not, "How could you?" Not, "I thought you were dead." "I'm glad you called." And in the restraint of that, in the immense, disciplined, maternal act of not saying the true thing, I heard everything, and it was more than I could hold, and I sat on my kitchen floor afterward with my forehead against the cabinet and stayed there until the light changed and changed again. I have not earned the right to grieve what I did to her. I know that. I'm saying it anyway. I'm saying it into this document that no one may ever read, because saying it is the only thing I know how to do with it, and silence is a room with no windows, and I have spent enough time in rooms with no windows. Part 7. 18 months before my mother's call, I arrived. October. I keep returning to October because October is when things turn, the year tilting on its axis, the leaves releasing their grip, the light going low and amber and horizontal, as though the sun itself were trying to look at the world from a new angle. The compound sat in the middle of that turning like a still point. White buildings, a garden going gold, smoke rising from a chimney and dissolving into a sky the color of stone. A woman met me at the gate. Not Lena, not yet. Someone whose name I've lost, which is its own small violence, because she was kind. She carried my bag. She looked at me and said, "You look tired." And I burst into tears. Standing there in the October light with a stranger holding my bag, I wept the way a pipe bursts, not from sadness but from pressure, years of pressure, the accumulated weight of a life that had offered me everything and in doing so had made me feel the poverty of myself. I was tired. I was so tired. Tired of choosing. Tired of being told I could be anything and hearing in that the accusation that I was, as yet, nothing. Tired of freedom that felt like falling. She took my arm. She walked me inside. He spoke to me that first evening. Not at a meeting, those would come later. Just the two of us, in a room with a wood stove and 2 chairs, the fire throwing shadows that moved on the walls like slow water. He asked me questions. Simple ones. What did I like to eat? What time did I wake up naturally, without an alarm? Had I ever grown anything with my hands? He listened the way no one had ever listened to me, with his whole body, with a stillness that made me feel as though my words were arriving somewhere, landing on something solid, being received. I had never felt that before. The full, undivided attention of another person, turned on me like light through a window I hadn't known was there. I grew toward it. Of course I grew toward it. What living thing wouldn't? I know what that was. I have since read about it in books with clinical titles and careful vocabularies. Love bombing, mirroring, idealization, the initial seduction that every account of every cult describes in language so similar it could be a template. I know the words. I can match the technique to the textbook. But vocabulary is not memory. Diagnosis is not experience. And in my memory, that evening is still warm. The fire is still real. His voice is still kind. The heat on my shins is still the safest thing I have ever felt, and I will not, I am not yet willing to let the language of pathology overwrite the language of that warmth. Even knowing what it was. Even knowing what it cost. Some memories are the last rooms we live in, and I am not ready to vacate this one. After we spoke, I walked to the main hall for my first meal. The bowls were laid out on the long tables. People moved in the amber light, quiet, unhurried, carrying food and water with the particular grace of people who have been taught that every action is a practice and every practice is a form of devotion. They smiled in my direction, not at me specifically, but toward me, the way light falls on whatever is nearest. And there was a child. A girl. 6, maybe 7. Sitting at the end of one of the long tables, her dark hair cut straight across her forehead, eating with a focus that I would later come to understand as presence, that quality of attention the compound cultivated in everyone, the awareness of each moment as though each moment were being watched. And it was. And she knew it. Even at 6. Especially at 6. She had the watchfulness of a creature raised in a place where observation was constant and love was conditional on being seen to be doing the right thing at the right time in the right way. She looked up at me. Studied me. The candid, unself-conscious appraisal of a child who has not yet learned to soften her gaze. She said, "Are you here to get better?" I smiled. I said, "I think so." She nodded. Serious. Certain. Then she said, "Everyone comes here because they're broken. He fixes them. But you have to let him take the broken parts out. It hurts, but then you're clean." She said this the way a child recites a verse she has heard so many times it has become the ground she walks on. Not parroting. She believed it. It was the water she swam in. She had been taught, at 6, at 5, at 4, at whatever age language begins to take root in a child's mind, that she contained broken parts. That a man could reach inside her and remove them. That the pain of this removal was not harm but healing. That the goal of her small, new, barely begun life was to be made clean. She was 6 years old. I sat down across from her. Someone handed me a bowl. The grain was warm. The room was quiet. Through the windows, the October light was fading, slow, golden, the kind of light that makes everything it touches look consecrated, holy, meant. And I thought, what a beautiful way to explain it. I thought, yes. That's exactly what I need. I picked up my spoon. I began to eat. The child went back to her meal. Outside, the light was gone, and the compound drew itself inward against the dark, and I was inside it, and the gate was open, and I had walked through it, and I would not walk back out for 4 years, and on my very first evening a 6-year-old girl had told me everything I needed to know, had held the truth up to my face like a mirror, and I had looked at it and seen something beautiful. I hear it now. I hear her, still. Her voice in the amber light. The certainty in it. The smallness of her hands around her bowl. I hear her, and I cannot go back and kneel beside her and say, "You are not broken." No one gets to reach inside you. The pain is not a price. You were already clean. I cannot go back. I can only sit here, in my apartment with its brick wall view, and write this down, and hope that writing it is a kind of kneeling, a kind of reaching back through time, a hand extended toward a child who is no longer a child, in a room I am no longer in a life I chose and chose and chose until the choosing was its own captivity. The gate was always open. I hear her, still.
The gate was always open. That was the cruelest detail. Not chains or locks, but a choice she made every day to stay. The most effective cages are the ones we build ourselves. From belonging, from meaning, from someone who finally sees us. What truths do we turn away from every day? Telling ourselves we're choosing freedom when we're only choosing comfort. Thank you for listening to The Leaving. If this resonated, please share it. Like, comment, and subscribe for more stories in the space between light and shadow. The gate is always open. Do you have the courage to walk through yours? Until next time.